Today we're joined by Joe Lawrence, Gundog trainer and host of the Hold the Line podcast. Joe's the author of Force-Free Gundog Training and has recently released a brand new book in that series. Let's get started. Hey Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's good to have you on again. I've, over the last few years, I'm always checking out what you're doing with the courses, with the books, with the podcast. And even though I'm not involved in Gundog training, there's so much to take away from all different kinds of dog training. I find it really, really interesting. So it's cool to see what you're getting up to, and you're getting up to a lot right now.
Oh, the puppies, yeah. It's funny because, well, it's not funny at all, actually. It's deeply serious and distressing. I would not have liked for the books and not come out at the same time that we had this list of puppies, because it's been hard to sort of promote the book and, talk about the book and spend time promoting the book on social media when I've also got this litter of puppies, which are just, I think to other people, probably the book is like the thing that they are more interested in. And my litter of puppies in the scheme of things is probably not that interesting to most people. But my life at the moment, from waking to going to bed, is puppies.
Okay.
So yes, it'd be good for the book to come out at another time when I could concentrate on promoting it a bit more. But yeah.
All right. Well, let's start with the puppies so they keep listening then. We'll get to the book later on. So obviously, this isn't your first litter, is it?
It's our first Weimaraner litter. So we've had a couple of litters of labs, a few litters of working labs, but it's our first Weimaraner litter. Yeah. So yeah, it's exciting.
You did a lot of research as well, didn't you? You're not, some breeders, they, I see posts on Facebook where people are like, hey, does anyone have a stud? I'm like, what the hell am I seeing here? Like, because for me, I don't even have the capacity to breed right now, but I'm always just checking out pedigrees, and I don't know, I just kind of like that stuff. But it seems like some people just like, oh, who's available?
Yeah, I mean, I think in today's world, where there's at the moment so many puppies, so many rescue centers filled to overflowing, you've got to have a really good reason to breed a litter. You've got to have like objectives that you want to achieve and a plan, and really thought it out. I think that sort of, who's kind of, I don't know, within a 20-mile radius of me with a male dog of the same breed is kind of, those are the litters that we need to not have happening right now, because we're overflowing. So yeah, that's yeah.
You actually shared some interesting insight before we were recording about that, because, and obviously we're both based in the UK, so I don't know if it's the same in other countries, but you were saying that there's a little bit of a drop in demand recently.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because, as you were saying, like in COVID, you couldn't, like puppies, like the prices of puppies like doubled and tripled because people were so desperate to have a puppy. And I guess they're just supply and demand issue, right? And it is interesting because from what I've read as well, although maybe this is outdated now, there was actually a bit of a lack of demand when it comes to certain kinds of puppies, right? Like the kind of puppies that people want as pet dogs, like this is at one point anyway, like the cockapoos and the cavapoos and stuff like that. And that was where the market was wide open for the puppy farms to just fill that gap, right? But I'm not sure if that's the case anymore. I don't know.
I mean, a lot of, well, not a lot of, I mean, some Facebook breeding groups, I don't post in them. I just sort of lurk in them and read about, what other people are saying and things. But what I've noticed recently is lots of people are saying, what do I do? I've got all these puppies that are like 6.5 weeks old. I can't home them. I'm advertising them on Champ Dogs. That's a, for people who don't know, that's a major sort of site for advertising puppies, and well-respected site. I'm advertising them on the Kennel Club website. I'm advertising them on Gumtree. They're on, and they're not selling. What do I do? And, there are people with puppies, whole litters of puppies at 9-10 weeks that they still can't place. And I think, that's, yeah. And then sometimes the response is drop the price. Like, so it is like COVID, but it's in reverse at the moment. Yeah.
Is that a particular breeds or?
No, all breeds, across the breeds. Yeah, it seems to be all breeds. So I was really worried about this before breeding a litter, and I think anyone who's thinking about breeding a litter would be right to be concerned about it and really think before having the litter. Particularly if you're not like you don't have a strong objective, you just want to have a litter of puppies. And I think that's the litters to be really thinking about whether you should hold off on.
Did you have, before you went into this, did you have like a wait list or people that were asking?
Yeah, we had a wait list, but some often wait lists sort of disintegrate once the plans become firm. You know, there's a big difference between an abstract puppy at some future point, maybe, and when it sort of comes down to it, and like now it's happening right now, and this is these the dates, and it's you know, there are paws on the ground, as it were, and then everything gets very real, and people will often reconsider then. So you can have wait lists, but they don't sometimes result in puppy buyers. So yeah.
So
Um,
with this litter, what was your kind of objective? Like, what was it that you wanted to kind of get out of the litter, and how did you make the choice about the parents?
Yeah, well, I really like American field bred Weimaraners. To me, they are the dogs which run best, hunt best, point best in the field. And those are the traits which are really lacking in UK Weimaraners. They've sort of been bred out by people breeding for the show market and the pet market, where it's all about appearance and these beautiful grey dogs, and people don't really care about whether they can actually do anything or not. In fact, sometimes it becomes a bit of a pain in the bum if your dog's, you know, chasing game and stuff. So they quite like it if they didn't have some of some of that drive. So I think a lot of those traits have been bred out of the breed. Um, and so yeah, whereas in America, there's maybe just because it's a bigger country, I don't know, but there's a pocket of people who are really committed to preserving these instincts and keeping this working ability. They hunt the dogs often off horseback in their field trials. So they kind of wide running, hard hunting dogs. They point beautifully. So those are lines I'm really interested in. And we'd imported Roche, the mum, from Belgium, and her dad is American lines. It gets a bit complicated. I don't know how much detail you want, but
No, I'm a geek. I love this stuff. I mean,
well, Roche's breeder is based in Belgium, and so she had Roche's mum, obviously, and Roche's mum is from French Belgium working lines, and then Roche's breeder imported Roche's dad from America to Belgium, and so that means Roche is 50% American and 50% French Belgium, or working lines. There's no UK blood in her. And then we bred her to a friend of mine, Mike Eads' dog, Obi, who's 100% American lines. Mike imported him from America when he was a pup, and he's now 10 years old. So that means these pups are 75% American strong field bred lines and 25% French Belgian working lines. No UK blood, bred in the UK. So yeah, it's quite an exciting, interesting litter, which I feel has gone a bit underappreciated, to be honest, by people in the breed and generally. Sometimes I think there's a lot of um, negativity about the American Weimaraners. I'm not quite sure why. It's like if people don't have something, they often like to poo-poo the thing they don't have, or the whatever. Like they'll talk crap about it.
right, right.
I think it probably goes on in all kinds of different. People who compete in knitting, if there's such things as knitting competitions, probably have this like human trait rather than anything particularly to do with dogs. But yeah, but here we are. Anyway, so we have this list of 6 puppies, 5 boys and 1 girl.
Right, right. Okay, that's really interesting
Yeah.
though, because I mean, I don't really know much about Weimaraners at all. In fact, the only real time I've listened to much of that stuff was with Craig Koshik, which
Mm.
your podcast introduced me to, who is just I love listening to that guy speak.
Yeah,
And
Craig's got his own podcast now, hasn't he? Can't remember what it's called. What's it called?
is it Upland?
Upland hunting or something. Yeah. Sorry, Craig,
Yeah.
if you're listening to this, we're like, I don't know, destroying, mangling your podcast.
I'll put it in the show notes. But like, he is a fascinating guy. Like, I was so just when I listened to your podcast with him, and then I ended up having him on as well because he's just so interesting. You could listen to him talk for hours and hours and hours, but it was interesting some of the stuff he was talking about. And I wonder, when he's talking about Weimaraners, and I wonder if he's talking about the kind of Weimaraners that you're talking about.
Yeah. So he had a silver shot Weimaraner, Henri, who is related to Mike's dog that we used was a silver shot Weimaraner over here in the UK. So yeah, very closely related. Yeah.
And then I remember one thing that really surprised me when he was talking about Weimaraners was he was saying that in Germany they have much more guarding instincts.
Mm.
Which I just never think of a Weimaraner as being that kind of dog, but
yeah, they're supposed to have this sort of protective instinct and sort of guard your belongings, as it were, and they want to see those traits in the dogs as well. And they're also supposed to be sort of quite like they work them on big game, so like boar and lots of tracking of deer, and like so. Whereas in the UK, that there's a lot less of that. There's not zero when it comes to deer and tracking, but there's no wild boar. I mean, on the continent, they'll use these dogs in various different ways. One of the ways is they'll sort of get them to go into woodland and drive out all the game, the big game, towards the guns, baying and just running and, you know, scaring out towards the guns. So they have to be quite confident and bolshy and confrontational with large, scary, intimidating animals. Whereas they don't have a need for that in America. They're more like bird dogs, really. They're sort of like, you know, pointers and setters, and they run on like upland hunting and birds. So those traits are quite different, and that sort of influences the personalities that you get as a result.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't really have, a lot of experience with working Weimaraners, but we have had loads of Weimaraner puppies come through just pet dog classes. And there's a real trend right now, actually. It'd be interesting to get your take on this. A lot of people are getting working line dogs that maybe they don't have any intention to work them. You see this a lot, especially with the more common dogs like the labs and the cockers and stuff like that. And I feel like a big part of my job now has become kind of trying to help those people that are really struggling because they've got this dog that wants to be doing stuff all the time, and they didn't sign up, or they didn't think that they were signing up for that. Um, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
challenge.
it is. It's really difficult. I mean, from the breeder's perspective, I can also say that there aren't lots of homes that do want the dogs that want to do all that. I mean, obviously, society now is very different to how it was when we all needed to go out and hunt and shoot our dinner. So, for most people, anyway. So you know, those requirements don't really exist anymore. So breeders, when they breed these kinds of dogs, it's difficult to find the homes to put them in. I mean, you can have multiple people saying, yeah, I think that the most laid back puppy in the litter. And you're like, okay, well, I've got 8 puppies and all 7 of you want the most laid back puppy in the litter. And I'm looking at this litter of really rambunctious, active, full of potential field bred dogs. I can't tell you which of these is most, none of these are laid back. And
That's
even if there was one, there'll probably be one. There's not going to be 7 of them. Why are you looking for this type of dog?
that's a really good observation, actually, because I have heard breeders say that as well. Like, because me and you, like, we want and that's the thing as well. Like, if I'm going to get a dog now, I kind of want the craziest dog in the litter.
Yeah.
I want the most boisterous dog. So it's like there are people like us that maybe that want the more like high energy dogs, and then there are the pet people that want the lower energy dogs. But I guess you don't know what you're going to get in a litter. Like, I mean, I think everyone that is involved in dog training also realizes how difficult it is to predict how a dog's going to end up as puppies. Some of the best dog trainers in the world have talked about it being like a lot of luck, the puppy that you choose. Whereas I think emotionally, people put a lot into their choice.
Yeah, we don't let people choose. We assign people to puppies when they're sort of 7-ish weeks old, 7.5 weeks. So we sort of place them in each home. And I think one reason for that is I don't want anyone to feel like they've got the last puppy, that everyone else has had a choice and this is the one no one else wanted, because it doesn't work like that. Like, they're all equally good puppies. They just got to place them in the right homes and match them up. So yeah, we don't let people choose. I think another thing to say is that some of the people I've spoken to, because what's been quite interesting is we have this like process when people apply for a puppy, they have to fill out a questionnaire, which is easy to fill out in that it's not quite lots of long answers. It's quite short, multiple choice answers. It does give you an opportunity to write more in certain places, but they have to do the questionnaire, and then we do a Zoom interview after we've done the questionnaire. And I can tell from this questionnaire, I can just pull out all of the issues. I don't know if it's part of like the fact that I've been teaching people for like decades, but I can pull out like, this person's not experienced with a young puppy. They're going to have like bitey puppy issues. This person doesn't quite have enough time. This person, like, I can pull out all the issues. And then it's just about talking diplomatically with the person. But the other thing I've discovered is, I mean, people need motivation. Like, they need to want to do something with a dog and to have that intent. That's one thing. They need time, because you can have all the motivation in the world, but if you're really busy in a full-time job, you're just not going to be able to achieve it. And you've got to want to learn. You've got to be able to learn. And that is really one of the most interesting things to assess. Like, that's one of the things I'm doing with the Zoom interview is when we talk to people about things and we try and explore and question their, things like, what do you feed your dog? Do you intend to ever neuter your dog, and what age? Vaccinations, how frequently do you vaccinate? What do you vaccinate for? We're trying to sort of see, are you able to hear our perspective? Are you able to learn from us? Are you able to listen to the research and then read the articles that we're giving you and take this on? or are you so set in your ways and determined to just be right? But there's also things that people can sort of um, be so keen to show you that they are doing everything right already that they're not able to hear. It's almost like you start to tell them something and they speak over you, and they just, do you know, like it's like there's lots of ways that people can't learn. And I'm trying to sort of see how much can I help someone take on these new points of view and bits of research, and are they able to do that? And that's one of the really useful things as well. So yeah, and I love it when people email me with questions. I think sometimes people think that they don't want to bother me or that I'm really busy with puppies, but I'm really reassured if I get questions from them saying, Joe, what should I do in this situation? Joe, I've been thinking about this. Joe, I'm worried about this. Can you give me some information on that? I'm more reassured than someone who's completely silent and doesn't contact me at all.
No, it's really interesting that you do all of that, because I think you're obviously in the minority. I don't think many people do all of that, but it's really cool that you care so much. I mean, I get that even in puppy class, you know, there's I would say that this is more unusual, unfortunately. But some people, occasionally you get people that are still in contact with a breeder, or the breeder set up a WhatsApp group, or they just some way of communicating, right? And I always think when you see that, that shows that they've got the dog from a breeder that cares, whereas I think the more, unfortunately, it seems more common that it's like, once you have the puppy, like, see ya, like,
Yeah.
you're on your own.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like the breeder is frankly completely knackered after raising the litter, and usually is keeping a puppy as well. And kind of, it's like, phew, once all the puppies have gone. So it can be, I think sometimes it's unintentional that happens, but yes. So
Oh,
yeah.
interesting. When I was, I almost got a Rottweiler once, and the person's questionnaire put me off. And not because I didn't want to fill out the questionnaire, because, like, I wanted a dog that was going to be. It didn't matter that they wanted to be friends with every other dog, but they needed to live with the dogs that I had, and I wanted to be able to use them as a stooge dog. And when I was talking to the breeder and they were doing the questionnaire and stuff, they were kind of, a lot of the questions I thought made me start, I don't know, gave me a bit of a red flag feeling, where it was like, hey, would you be willing to crate and rotate the dogs for the rest of their life if needed? I'm like, what? This is like, I'm trying to buy a puppy. Like, you're already thinking about this. So for me, that was like, you know what? Actually, I'm going to pass on this
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think genetics also is like, when we've had some people I've talked with who, like, they understood that what we were breeding for, but they thought that they could just not, like, if they don't train the dog as a gun dog, sure, that's okay. They're not going to encourage the gun dog instincts, and the dog's going to be, fit into their household fine and just be like, any other easygoing dog. Not realizing that what you're breeding is a sort of breeding something which is receptive and waiting to meet something in the environment, being game and scent and all that lovely stuff. And when the puppy meets that, there's nothing about training involved in that, or exposure, or like, it is exposure, but it's like, once one meets that, it's like two things coming together which just marry, and something catches a light, and you can't do anything about it. Like, you can't really prevent that unless you're going to walk your dog indoors. Unless you have some massive indoor facility where your dog's never going to go outside, never going to encounter game, then that's going to be an issue for you. Even on country walks or whatever, your dog's going to flush pheasant or rabbit or whatever. Like, this is going to be something you're going to have to confront. And if you're not ready for it, and if you're not expecting it, because you're thinking, la la la, I'm not training my dog to be a gun dog, so we're not going to encourage all this stuff, you're going to be taken by surprise when it happens. You're going to be on the back foot, and then you're going to be solving something that's already happened rather than preventing something before it happens, as it were. So you can't really opt out of this. If you have a dog with this genetically, you've got to be there to be ready when it happens. Yeah.
I think a lot of puppy owners kind of aren't, the ones that I see, like, oftentimes are not even really aware that there's something to be avoided there or anything like that. So sometimes they unwittingly make their dog crazy about chasing wildlife, right? Like, it's like, in the beginning, it's really just, the puppy starts chasing squirrels and all that kind of stuff, and they're like, oh, brilliant, they're coming home tired. And it's like, they do that for a few months, and then you've just created this dog that's just, manic when you take it to the woods.
Yeah, and when it doesn't come back for like an hour and a half, you start to realize there might be a problem.
Right, and at that point, it's like so much harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's with the kind of dogs that we're talking about, it's like sometimes I find it quite an awkward conversation to navigate because it's like, hey, you've got this dog that wants to do stuff all the time, and there's an a bit of a like a motto in gun dog training, isn't there, where people will oftentimes say like, oh, I don't walk my dog, meaning like I don't walk them, I just take them out and train them, and it's like if you see that as like the optimum way to raise a working dog puppy, like for the first however long you're taking them out, you're just working them, you're doing stuff with them, you're not going on like walks where they just get to do what they want. It's like that's quite hard to sell just your average dog owner on because they don't even particularly like dog training. It's not like they have a passion for dog training. And that makes it really kind of hard sometimes to coach those people.
Yeah, I just don't understand. This comes from the perspective of a dog trainer. I don't understand people who get dogs and don't have a passion for dog training, because for me, that's what it's about, really. I mean, I just don't understand that. It would be like having, I don't know, a really nice sports car that you just never drive. You just look at it sometimes out the window, but it doesn't go anywhere or do anything.
But all they didn't really want the sports car. They wanted like just a regular get
Yeah.
from A to B. It's like if you could buy a Ferrari by accident, right? Like, or like a race car by accident. It's like,
Yeah.
but you can't do that with other things.
Yeah, the thing is, the car doesn't suffer either. So obviously, the car isn't a sentient being. So you could just leave it parked on the street and look at it and not do anything with it if you wanted. But obviously, a dog's not the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's tricky. And I think part of it's interesting as well. Like, well, why are people getting more working line dogs? And I think that's an interesting discussion. I can think of at least two reasons. Maybe you have more. Like, one is I think in some breeds, the kind of show varieties of actually, or the show world has actually alienated regular dog owners. Like, I don't think most people that want a Labrador want a barrel dog that is just like the fattest Labrador you've ever seen, which is what the show people love. So of course, naturally, like if I didn't know anything and I saw those two labs, of course I will take the working one. It looks like a much more beautiful dog, right? But obviously that comes with a lot of stuff that they don't realize. And then the other one is because of the fact that regular people that aren't dog trainers or aren't obsessed with dogs aren't really breeding their dogs as much anymore. It's like maybe again there's a niche there that isn't being filled, in the sense that like in the past probably like people were breeding their dogs all the time. You could get a pet line dog like with ease, right? Whereas now it's like puppy farms or crazy working dog people like us, right? And there's not really many people in the middle.
Hmm. Well, I think people are very focused on appearance. I think that's very sort of, they don't realize what's under the bonnet. If we stick with the car analogy,
Yeah.
like they don't realize that there's a big difference. If the dog looks the same, sort of thinking about, show bred version of a dog and a working bred version of a dog. But when they do look very different, then it is apparent that there's a difference. And if visually and in a sort of appealing way, the working line dog is nicer or more appealing to them, then that's what they will go for, I guess. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think with Weimaraners, there's not such a, in terms of what they look like, a difference between those which can hunt and those which can't hunt. But yeah. And you get into the whole sort of dual purpose thing, which is something which I'm always, oh my God, you always feel like you're stirring up a can of worms if you venture into the territory of discussing dual purpose dogs and that sort of thing, because the people who believe in them are really, believe that it's possible to have a dog which is superb and amazing and incredible in the field and a dog which wins in the show ring, and that this is achievable. And, in some numerically strong breeds, it might be, but in the vast majority of breeds, it isn't. And the reason for that is when you put two dogs together and you select what you're breeding for, you have to have a priority. You have to have like your number one top thing. And because humans are tend to be so led by like appearance and what things look like, they will always prioritize success in the show ring and the dogs which look the way that show ring winning dogs would look over dogs which are successful in the field. And that's just kind of how it goes, sadly. So yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting because I mean we get a little bit of that when I look at IGP pedigrees. Like sometimes I see people that are trying to do that as well, but I don't know anyone that is really serious about IGP that would go and get a dog that has show lines in it, because
Mm,
it would just instantly put you off.
yeah. I know. I mean,
And also, I don't know if you have this in the Gundog world, but it's like there's also a little bit of a reputation among the show people for kind of like bodging the working certificates, like kind of like, I'm not sure how real legit that is,
hmm. I don't know if that happens so much in the Gundog world. I mean, I think there is a sense of, I don't know, like, I don't think most people really want or need a dog which hunts in a crazy way. And to be really for a dog that's just going to win open field trials, they have to be a little bit on the edge. Like the really good dogs, it's almost like you're on the edge of almost losing control, but you're not quite losing control. And that's the sort of really exciting kind of dog. To have that sort of dog, you need to have you need to put a lot of things in place in terms of training and resources and access to land and all the rest of it, to make a success of it. And I just think most people don't want or need that kind of dog. And so it all comes back to, what they look like. And let's just have one which, this one looks the same. And I don't know. It's just, yeah, it's really, it's difficult. I think, there are people who are so passionate about preserving these working instincts. And then I do like, there's this common sense voice I have in my head, which is like society on a broader scale arguably doesn't need lots of these kind of dogs. They need like dogs bred for pet homes and dogs that are bred for therapy work and dogs that are, those sorts of dogs. And like human society is moving in a different direction. Why are we breeding to preserve these traits which actually, we don't need to go out and shoot our game every day? And then you get the breed preservationists saying, but it's part of the breed and it should be this way. And then you're thinking, well, why should it be this way? Because dogs, before we decided to like write down what every breed looked like and have these sort of chemical descriptions of what they look like, we were all very flexible about, dogs, various breeds breeding together. We didn't have these sort of rigid distinctions between one breed and another. And so either you get into like really mucky territory there and it's all a bit confusing.
No, I know what you mean. I just think there's room for both. Like, I think that, people like me and you, we want to have the high drive dogs, and that's great. And then there are people that don't, right? But I just think that people need to be sure about what they're buying, and then breeders need to make sure that they're vetting people correctly, right? I remember having a conversation years ago, with someone, and we were talking about like different breeds, like pit bulls and the Malinois and stuff like that, and we were talking about guarding instincts and dog to dog aggression and stuff like that. And I was kind of like, I don't understand why people don't breed these issues, like breed it out. Like, why don't we breed pit bulls that don't want to fight other dogs? Why don't we breed Malinois that don't want to resource guard? And he was like, because that wouldn't be a Malinois, that wouldn't be a pit bull.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and then the more, it took me a long time to kind of get that, but like, I think he's right. Like, if you want, like, you just need to know what you're getting, right? Like,
Well, to throw another spanner into the works, though, then there are other people who, like I'm an example of this person, probably a very extreme example. But when I got our first dog, who was a Weimaraner, back in 2004, we had no intention of doing anything related to Gundog work. That wasn't where we got her. We didn't know anything about the whole Gundog world, and we just wanted a Weimaraner. I'd seen one walking through Brighton where we lived at the time, and was like, oh, that's a really beautiful grey dog. What is it? And I went home and I said to Adam, there's this beautiful dog that I saw today. It was grey all over. It was really beautiful. If we ever get a dog, we should have one of those dogs. And Adam said, well, that's the sort of dog that I've been telling you we should have. And I've been ignoring him and just like, it's been going over my head because he'd been going on about a dog. And then it just seemed like fate. Like we both thought this type of dog, and then I just got, I don't know, I started to Google puppies, and like it just went from there. And yeah, but I didn't want to do any Gundog stuff with the dog. But I joined this forum, which is now doesn't exist anymore. It's called the Weimaraner Forum, and it was one of those chat forums, with discussion forums online, and people were kind of saying these dogs need something to do. Like they're really intelligent, and if you don't do something with this dog, it will become destructive around your house, and you need to like train it, and you need to get into an activity or a dog sport with the dog. And so I went along. I watched obedience classes, and I watched a little bit of pet dog training classes, and I went along to Gundog classes. I kind of checked out everything in the area. This is before we had a puppy, and decided like Gundog stuff is maybe something I'd like to do, but I'll try a little bit of everything. And we got this this puppy whose parents are both UK show champions, so was not really bred for working. Neither of them worked in any way. And that was our first dog. And then with that dog, we got into the whole Gundog stuff. We started to do working tests. We were very successful in working tests, and we flunked it in field trials because she couldn't hunt a point because she was a UK bred Weimaraner. So yeah, I mean, I think, so I've always got to, when I'm talking to people and they're telling me, like, that's one of the things I'm pushing against, like, are they interested in doing more with that dog? Do they want to learn? Are they, if I start to give them a bit of this information, do they go, oh yeah, that's really, like, I've got one man on my list. He's like ordered all my books already, even though we're going to give him all the books with the puppy pack, but he's already ordered them all before he's got the puppy. And really got into it, and, having originally not had much of interest in Gundog stuff. So I feel like, how do you determine that as well? Because people may know nothing when they come to you, and they may know nothing because they just don't know anything. So they don't know that this is something that they want to get into because they haven't been exposed to it yet. So how do you, vet for that kind of person as well? So it's difficult.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, and I see that again, when I'm teaching, because sometimes I feel like the people that go out and get a working line dog is a little bit sink or swim. Like either they're going to start getting into it and then, they're hooked and it becomes like a hobby, or they don't and it doesn't go very well. And either they just live with the fact that it's not going well, or the dog ends up being rehomed to someone else. And it's like, yeah, it's a challenge. I try to get those people hooked. Like, that's really what I try and do, is when I see someone with a dog that's got a lot of working drive, I try to get them doing something. But it's hard to succeed with everyone because some people, they're just, like you said, they're busy. They have other things going on. They have other hobbies. They have other jobs and stuff. And they're not, like, they didn't realize what they were kind of getting themselves in for.
Yeah, sometimes it's really difficult. When I don't teach classes in person anymore, but when I did, like, somebody's just like, oh, it's such a waste. Why have you got this dog? It's such a waste. It's so wasted on you. I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes, especially even just doing, like, if we do scent detection classes or something, scent detection, I think, is very immediately obvious when we do the scent classes, and actually, a lot of those working line dogs that people accidentally kind of get as pets, they can be like phenomenal scent dogs. And sometimes I see them and I'm just like, yeah, exactly what you said there. Like, wow, what a waste. Like, this dog legit could be in the police. It could be doing search and rescue. Like, it's got the skills. Yeah.
And instead, like, it's just sat around all day.
And some people, like, they just can't, I don't know what it is, like the timing, like their timing or their ability to read the dog or to respond quickly to what they're seeing. It's just not there. And that's so frustrating as well.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, that's something that I think a lot of people don't like to talk about, because I think it's like anything, it's like any physical skill, like playing football, playing a sport, right? It's like there are different degrees of natural ability as well. Like, obviously, I think everyone can get better, but sometimes just in the same way, like, sometimes you see people when they're trying to train dogs and it's just like, wow, this is so unnatural for you, right? Like, this is just really not coming to you at all. And the opposite too. Sometimes you see someone who never trained dogs before and it's like, wow, like, you have picked this up so quickly. And it's the same with any like physical skill, right? What's, like, I think more heartbreaking is when someone's really into it and they just don't have much physical skills. I think, to be honest with you, I think there's a lot of professionals even like that, but I don't think if you're a pet dog trainer, I think you can kind of get away with it a little bit, because if if you're teaching, like, people how to manage puppies, it's like, you don't need a massive amount of practical skills, but you're gonna have a ceiling, right? And I guess all you can do is just try to improve as much as you can.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think that's one of the things, like, with our pups, because I do a little bit of training every day with the pups that we've got here. So it's only like a few minutes, like 3 minutes of clicker training and stuff, just to do basic stuff and to teach them how to learn, really. But, my timing is good, she says, if I may say so myself. Yeah. Yeah, I think they sometimes go from we had this previously with our lab litters from this experience of like learning with a trainer who's like the timing's really good and they're really into it, and then they go to their new home, and the new home is like the timing is off and the click is really late, and the puppy gets frustrated, and it's just really hard for me. I'm like, but then I'm like, Joe, you cannot keep 6 puppies. You must play this.
For sure. Yeah. I know some breeders keep way too many, that's for sure. They can't help themselves.
Yeah.
It's a little bit, sometimes if I go train dog sports, you can come away from a session feeling like, oh my God, I'm just so crap at this. Like I'm terrible. And then you go teach a puppy class and you just feel like a god, And it kind of just gives you a little pick me up, like just motivates you a little bit, like, okay, maybe I'm not terrible at this.
Yeah, well, it's just skills like everything else, really, isn't it? I mean, with puppies and like general dog training, there isn't an infinite number of different things that a dog can throw at you. There's only a limited range. Like if you're trying to train behavior X, and there's like A, B, C, D, E things that they can throw at you, and there are various ways to respond, but there's not like a million different things. So you kind of figure out how to help people with the things that can go wrong. But then I think the difficulty as the skills get more nuanced and more advanced, your ability to know how to react and how to adjust things when things go wrong is it takes experience. You've got to relearn all those various ways of responding to the dog in accordance to all the new and more advanced skills that you're teaching. So yes.
I think also it's just a case of practice. Is like, I probably trained thousands of puppies how to sit, lay down, stand, all that kind of stuff, but maybe I've not trained thousands of dogs to do heel work, or thousands of so it's just like getting the reps, I guess. Takes time. So why did you decide to write another book then?
Oh God, I don't know. I mean, I'm a sucker for punishment, because I think, why did I decide to breed another litter of puppies? Because you forget about the pain involved in the last time around. Well, I was always going to write another book, because the first book was the fundamentals. That was like sort of teaching people the basics and how to get started in all these different skills. And then this is a more advanced book, like taking people right through to working a dog in the field and actually having a dog that does the job they're bred for. So yeah, that's why. I mean, originally it was all supposed to be one book, but that would have been, I mean, they're pretty big books as it is. That would have been a humongous book. So we had to kind of break it up. So this is the second book. And on the subject of Craig, I should say he it's his beautiful cover photo on the front of the book.
I love it. And so Joe, did you self-publish this one? Did you get a publisher this time?
I did. No, I self-published this one as well, because that was so successful after the first one. Did I tell you about the story with the first one? I think I did.
You told me, but some people won't know it, so maybe it'd be worth you telling the story again.
Okay, so the story with the first one is that it was all written, finished, completed, and I sent it off to a publisher, which a friend of mine recommended, her field sports, UK field sports publisher. And they loved it, so they wanted to publish it. Totally all over it. We signed the contract. It was edited by a professional editor. It was designed. We'd chosen the cover photo. It was all being laid out. It was towards the very end of this whole process. And the publisher showed it to, quote unquote, the editor of the UK's leading shooting magazine, who said that if it were published, he would give it a really bad review, because you can't train dogs using these methods, meaning positive reinforcement, and that you can't train gun dogs using these methods. And he would give it a terrible review. And because of that, the publisher pulled out and said they wouldn't publish it, because this review is really important to the success of the book, allegedly. And so they weren't going to publish it. So they pulled out. So we published it ourselves. And yeah, 2 fingers up to them, because it was really successful and it was their loss.
Well done to you. It's such a shame that, like, just dog politics, right? It's like, come on.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm surprised they didn't just try to get you to change the title.
I don't think it was the title so much as in the book itself. It was clicker training. It was giving lots of food to your dog. It was like all these things which traditional gun dog world thinks is, not what you should be doing. And it discusses the use of punishment and aversives and how to not use those and why those are slippery downward slopes and that sort of stuff. So I think that on that basis, they did not want to see it out there. So they tried to do all they could to stop it from getting out there.
What was the reception, by the way? Like, did you what was the reaction of the kind of more mainstream Gundog community
I
to
don't I don't
to your
know if there
work in
has been.
general, I
I don't know if there
guess?
has been a reaction because I don't know if they are really aware of it. I feel like the people who are aware of it are the people who go looking for it. That you kind of got to search for positive reinforcement Gundog training or Force-Free Gundog training or something like that for it to come up. And if you're not searching for those terms, then you're not going to really be aware of it, or you're just going to, even if you hear the title, you're just going to be, oh, that's not for me because it's force-free. I'm not force-free. You'll just be like that about it. So I don't really know if there has been a big reaction to it.
How do you feel about that brand moving forwards? Because I feel like when we spoke before, even when we were speaking before, I feel like the term force free wasn't kind of what it is now. Like I don't know. I feel like it's kind of become almost a little bit of a poison term now. Whereas
Yeah, I mean,
in the
uh,
past it just kind of like it was just about training positively. Whereas now I feel like when people say force free, they're talking about more of the extreme side of that.
I mean, yeah, I know what you mean, but it's difficult because there are a very limited number of terms. So obviously, if you're writing a book which is about clicker training and using food and using positive reinforcement and how not to use aversives and how to not do force fetch, for example, and how to do the clicker retrieve instead, then you need to have an umbrella term which captures and summarizes your type of training. If you're going to try and succinctly summarize it in a book title to someone or to anyone who's coming across your business. So I think that's where the whole force-free thing comes from. I mean, but I mean, what I would describe it if I were to elaborate that more using more words is to say that, I have people training with me who use e-collars and who use prong collars and who are definitely not, their overall training is not force-free. But they take bits of this book. And for example, they might substitute force fetch with the clicker retrieve. And for me, that's a win because the less force that we can use, the better. So if someone's taking out a chunk of their training which used to be force based and replacing that with positive reinforcement, then that's a win, even if they're still sometimes using the e-collar to stop chasing or I don't know, something else. So it's not for me this all or nothing thing, which is I think what it can come across as. And I think it's really important to try to dispel those divisions and boundaries because they just cause people to take a stance in one place or the other. Like I'm force free or I'm not force free. And then that once things get embedded in that way, it's really difficult for these two groups to blur and for things generally over time to become more force free.
Yeah,
Because everyone's identified themselves so firmly somewhere that they're not going to move,
yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I totally agree. And I think anyone with just any kind of sensibility should realize that it's exactly what you said. If you can use less force, then why wouldn't you? Right? But I think the
Hmm.
caveat that a lot of people say is like, provided you can get the same result. And that's where it's like the burden of proof. And I think, that's what is cool about kind of what you're doing in terms of putting stuff out there is like, you're kind of showing a different way of doing things. And, I think that the results will speak for themselves, right? Like, when you're getting results, people can see that the dogs are performing well. It's like that starts to spark interest.
Yeah, I mean, I almost wish we didn't have to use words, but I feel like we do have to use the words because people need to know what they're buying when they're buying a book. It's not just another Gundog training book like every other Gundog training book. Like it has to have an identity because that's part of the selling point as well. It has to be different to other Gundog books, and so that's part of. Yeah, you got to sum it up somehow succinctly. But I wish we didn't have to make it seem so. I don't know, identify it so firmly in one camp or the other. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also like an interesting decision too. I know you feel a little bit damned if you do, damned if you don't, because it's like if you don't, then you're right. Like, is your target audience not even realizing that it exists? But then are you going to reach less people because maybe they would be put off by the title, but maybe if they would have read it, they might have been more convinced. It's
Hmm.
like kind of a difficult like subject, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is kind of, and give us like a little bit of an overview of this stuff that's covered in this book.
So, stuff. Look, that's why I have the book here because my brain is so full of puppies that I would not remember what the book is about if I did not have the index or the table of contents.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, basically, it just goes through. What we try to do is we try to do sorts of it's been quite ambitious because I tried to sort of make it relevant to all gun dogs. Obviously, all the different subgroups of gun dogs have very different roles in the field. And I've tried to write something which is going to be useful to people, whatever subgroup of gun dog they've got, whether they've got a spaniel or a retriever or HBR, or in America they call them versatile breeds, HBRs. So I've tried to write something which is going to be useful for everyone. Not all the book will be useful for everyone because there'll be certain sections that are not relevant to your dog, but hopefully all the essential stuff is there for everyone. So there's lots of sort of retriever training drills. I really like American retriever training drills. So in America, for retrievers, they have this very sort of defined progressive system that they go through. That they train the basics, and then they train them with all these sort of transitional drills that teach them handling and casting, and it's very kind of structured. And in the UK, it's training's not quite like that. It's all a bit more wishy-washy and harder, I think. And I think in terms of people new to it, to get an understanding of how all the bits come together and how they end up with a dog which can actually do, for example, a blind retrieve. So what I've tried to do is bring in some of that structure from the US and show people how it all fits together and how dogs learn the concepts involved in a blind retrieve. And sort of teach people how to put it all together. And we've got a flow chart as well, which shows people how all these different exercises fit together. And then for HBRs / versatile breeds, we've got the same stuff as well. We've got the hunting side of things. It's a bit harder to teach people like things like scent and how to use wind and how to understand, I don't know, moisture and all that sort of stuff in writing. Obviously, those things are much better learned out in the field with someone experienced, and you don't need that person to be force-free because, you know, traditional gun dog trainers know all this stuff and they're happy to teach you about it all in person. And I think there comes a point where you've got to go and learn from them rather than from a book. So I've tried to sort of direct people in you know, those sorts of situations away to people they can go and learn more from in person. But yeah, I mean, the book tries to cover absolutely everything. So it's quite ambitious, and we've got the same sort of, I don't know if you know from the first book, we had an illustrator do some really nice sort of stick people. We've got the same illustrator who's illustrated all the exercises with the same sort of stick figures from the first book, because those were very successful. Everyone loved them, so we got them back again. So yeah, that's kind of what the book is about.
Yes, I saw you talking about the kind of structured approach, and that kind of was quite exciting to me because I think that's lacking in the dog training world in general. Actually, like oftentimes things can be a little bit wishy-washy. It's one of the things that I really liked about when I was doing some of the SWDI stuff, which is Jens Frank's scent detection courses, is like incredibly detailed step by step, you know. And I just think that's so helpful. Whereas in like IGP, since I've been doing IGP, it's like it's so hard to learn because there is so little information on just so much of that stuff. Not only like how you teach things, but also just the routine in general. Like just going around, it's just there's so much to take on board, and it's really hard to learn that side of things. So I think it's really cool that I think that's really interesting. And actually, that almost motivates me. Well, that does motivate me to check out the book in itself because I'm like, I'm really interested in how Joe's put that together.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if what I said there made much sense if people don't know much about gun dog training, but like on blind retrieves, the dog doesn't know where the retrieve is. So there are different skills that have to come together to help the dog be able to find it. Things like, for example, you have to have a confident go out. So that might be like a working trial send away would be an example, or obedient send away, but over a much longer distance. So it has to go out in a straight line and run forever, hopefully, or at least for several hundred yards. And then you blow your whistle. So that would stop the dog. And then you should be able to cast the dog left or right or back left or back right. And again, when you give that cast, the dog should maintain that straight line, preferably for hundreds of yards until you stop them again. So basically it's all like, you wouldn't train all of this together. And I think that's the thing that gets a bit, one of the things that tends to happen in not good gun dog training is all these skills get smooshed together and people end up stumbling through these exercises. Whereas, you know, one bit goes wrong, for example, maybe the go out goes wrong, or maybe a cast goes wrong, or the stop whistle doesn't happen. And instead of isolating that bit that isn't working and going, right, we need to work on that bit until it's working and then put it back together into the chain, they just sort of keep stumbling through the blind retrieve, and it just doesn't really teach the dog anything, because even if the dog gets the retrieve at the end, which then that's going to reinforce everything else in the chain that's preceded it, include the good bits and the bad bits, and the dog's not really progressing in terms of fixing the stuff that didn't work very well. So you've got to kind of isolate the bits that aren't working and train those bits separately. So you would train your go out separately. You would sit the dog and then walk away, and then train your cast separately. There's lots of sort of casting exercises. You would teach your dog to hold a straight line. There'll be lots of different points where the dog can run to, and you'll teach the dog how to take a line from your hand. So you're breaking down these skills into component parts, and then when you've got all these different bits trained through these various exercises, you put them together and you have your blind retrieve. But you don't actually run it all together very often, because there's always a bit that you need to be working on more than any other bit, and that's the bit you're isolating and taking out to work on in training. So yeah, that's a kind of summary, I think, of the retrieve side of things. But I've got less into the whole retrieving. Like, I was really into the whole, having a dog which is like, you can handle them like a piece on a chessboard and having this ultimate control over the dog. And now I'm much more into just seeing dogs hunting and, running confidently, being in connection with you out in wild spaces, slamming onto points which look really stylish and beautiful. I mean, for me, that's kind of what it's all become about, really, rather than the whole retrieving side of things. So I no longer teach my HBRs to handle, like to take straight lines. And that may mean that we have some retrieves that we just can't find because I can't get them to where they need to go. But instead I rely on their noses. So, which is what is done on the continent and where they're originally from. So on the continent, they don't expect HBRs, versatile breeds, to handle, to take a straight line, to stop, to go left, to stop, to go right. They would think that's a bit ridiculous for these breeds. And in the UK, they do, which is really confusing. And I just think everything got a little bit confused because the UK had pointers and setters and retrievers and spaniels, and HBRs were this much later import from the continent, and they had to fit into the UK system. So rather than create this whole different set of rules for them, or thinking of them as a completely different type of dog, they ended up kind of being fitted into what already existed in the UK, and the expectations of what they could do got imposed on them from what was done with retrievers. So they kind of didn't allow them to be what they could be, I think, in many ways. And that's not what happened when they went to America, because America is very respectful of countries of origin and will always look back to where they came from and think about how are they assessed in their countries of origin. Then they came up with NAVTA and these sort of organizations that assess them based on what they are assessed, the way they are assessed on the continent. Whereas in the UK, we like to think that, I don't know, our way is best and you must fit in with what we do here. And haven't quite accepted the difference and the way that they actually bring something positive and new and additional, rather than being not as good retrievers, as it were. If I've kind of summed that up right. Yeah. So
for people that aren't involved in the Gundog stuff, what kind of goes on in this country? Because there are different things, right? Like between like actual going out and hunting, and then there are also like field trial championships and all this kind of stuff. Like, can you kind of explain a little bit more like what the landscape is with that kind of side of things?
Well, I think the first thing is it depends a bit on the dog that you have. So whether you've got a spaniel, retriever, HBR, so you've got to kind of first know what sort of dog you've got. And then there are different things that you can do. So in a sort of completely non-competitive way, you could just go and work on your local shoot. So there are different roles for dogs. Probably what you'll end up doing to start with is beating. So you'll end up just being in the beating line. Your dog will just run, preferably left to right across the beat, and preferably not too far forwards, but sometimes they do. And put the birds up for the guns to shoot. So dogs don't really require much I don't know, training, instinct to be able to do that, as long as they're not completely AWOL. Like, there are even non-Gundog breeds in the beating line. There are terriers, there are German shepherds, Dalmatian, poodles, although arguably some people would say poodles are hunting breeds, so I just put that in there. But yeah, so there's lots of non-Gundog breeds working on the shoot, and all the dog has to do really is be busy and put birds up. So they don't need loads of control. As long as they don't go AWOL several fields away and refuse to recall back and put up birds in the next drive, then nobody's going to be too worried. And then the other role on the shoot is picking up. So when, usually those are retrievers, and they would sit at heel. When bird comes down, they'll be sent to retrieve. Sometimes you'd wait until the drive is over and then send the dogs out to sweep up and pick up the game. Usually the runners will be retrieved. Those are the birds which are shot, but they're still alive. They'll be retrieved during the drive because we don't want them to escape and suffer and get away. So you'd send them dog immediately. And then after the drive, the game which is all down would be swept up by the picking up teams. So usually for picking up, though, they typically want several, like they want one handler with several dogs. So like 4 or 5, a team of dogs, really. And so it can be hard to get into as a newcomer because, you're inexperienced, your dog is inexperienced, and you've only got one dog. So you're not like a big, you're not very appealing to anyone who wants a team of people. So that can be harder to get into, but the beating line is much easier to get into because they usually welcoming of anyone who wants to come and be. So that's sort of a non-competitive way of getting involved in things. And then probably working tests, like Gundog working tests, are one of the one of the ways that most people get involved in Gundog stuff to start with. There are different working tests for retrievers, for spaniels, for HBRs, and there are different classes at working tests. So there's puppy class, novice class, open class. Sometimes there are a few more. Sometimes there's a class called novice dog, novice handler, which is for newcomers. And so they're very sort of welcoming. They run in the summer months, so sort of March or April through to September. And they involve a lot of retrieving. So the thing that I would say about working tests is for HBRs, I'm not a huge fan of working tests because, as I just explained, I think their job should be like the hunting and pointing side of things. And they do retrieve, but they're not like, they shouldn't be like Labradors, for example, or retrievers. They shouldn't be handled to that degree. And I think that often working tests become these sort of, I don't know, circus trick kind of scenarios where you're like presented with these really complicated, like there are 5 retrieves down. I want you to retrieve that one, stop the dog. Another thing will be retrieved. And then when your dog gets back here, I want you to go and retrieve that blind. And then I want you to do, like, it gets really complicated sometimes. And it could be quite fun. It can be quite fun, but it's also not really what they're really going to be doing in field trials. And it's not totally connected to, I mean, for example, to go back to my first dog, Weimaraner Slate, she was really good at working tests because she was a really good retriever, and we did really well. We won puppy classes, we won novice, we won graduate, we were in the top sort of 3 in open. And I think because I was a newcomer to the whole HBR scene, I'm going off, by the way, on a huge tangent here and stop telling you about all the different ways you can compete with these dogs. But
no, I like it. Keep going. It's good.
Yeah, so because I was a newcomer to the Gundog scene, I thought that you're taught that the correct sort of progression is to do working tests first. When your dog is successful at working tests, go and see what field trials are about. But field trials for HBRs are completely different to working tests. And you can have a dog which is really successful at working tests and not very good at field trials because they can't hunt or point very well. And that was the case with my Weimaraner. So there is a hunting test in working tests, but it's a bit of a joke because the dogs, you can have like 30 dogs in the class and they run over the same patch of land. There's no game in it whatsoever. Other dogs wee on logs and trees and things, and your dog goes and wees over the same place. And so it's not fresh ground often. And it's just a bit of a joke of assessing hunting ability. They don't put any game out. There's no planted game now. There's no game in launchers or anything. So it's a bit of a joke when it comes to assessing hunting. And if you've got a dog which will just run, even if they won't hunt, then you can get an acceptable score in the hunting, even though the dog's not really hunting, they're just running around. And then if you do well in the retrieving tests, overall, you can get a good score. But when you go on to do field trials, your dog may not have the skills to be any good at all in the field. So, I think that working tests should be seen as a completely different, separate way of doing stuff with your dog. They're not really, for HBRs, leading well into the skills required for field trials. That's kind of how I feel. For retrievers, I think it's very different because obviously they are the retrieving specialists and all that fancy retrieving stuff is very relevant to what they might be required to do in field trials and stuff. So that's a bit different. Anyway, working tests. There is something called the Gundog Club, which I should give a shout out to because they are positive reinforcement based and force-free. And they have like a list of Force-Free Gundog instructors who will help you progress through various different assessment grades. There's like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. I think there's some breeds have grade 5 as well. And basically what that's doing is not competitive, but you get a grade like pass, merit, distinction or whatever, a bit like music exams and ballet exams and things. And then you can progress on to the next level. So it kind of gives you something to work through without having to be first, second or third. Because that's another thing to say about the UK is it's quite competitive. Like there are some countries where they assess dogs and it's about achieving a standard rather than being first, second, or third. So NAVDA in America is an example of achieving a standard. And on the continent, there are a lot of assessment clubs which will, in various different countries, which will assess to certain standards. Whereas there are other countries where it's all about first, second, third, and it's competitive. And I think for people starting out, that could be quite intimidating to have to be competitive rather than to have to meet a standard. So the Gundog Club in the UK is about meeting a standard, and I think that's good for people starting out to give a starting point. And then there's field trials, which is probably the sort of, you've got to have a dog which can do the job in the field to some degree before you even enter a field trial. And that's a whole other thing, which involves a lot of driving, frankly. A lot of driving around the country, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and being out in 5 minutes and then standing around the gallery the rest of the day can be what it's like.
But field
But
trials are more like it sounds like they're a little bit more kind of closer to the real thing.
they are, well, yes, for HBRs, versatile breeds, they are, your dog's out there, they're hunting, they're pointing the game when they find it. They should wait until you ask them to flush the game, the guns will shoot the game you ask them to retrieve. So that's like the full thing, the full package, exactly as a dog is supposed to be bred for. So that is, in my eyes, yeah. Especially if you can get up north. Up north, we have beautiful moorland in the UK. And that really lends itself to wider running dogs and these beautiful points that happen at a distance, and it's all lovely. Whereas I think down south we have a lot of woodland and cover, and you don't really, in the same way, sometimes get the dogs to really stretch out and pull out and show us that sort of what they can do. And the
So
other thing
are
yeah,
they
yeah.
are they competitive then? Field trials.
Oh yes, yeah.
That's a
They are
competitive thing.
the pinnacle of Gundog competitiveness. Yeah, because ultimately they lead to the title field trial champion. So that is, what everybody wants to get on their dog. Whereas working test, there's no titles involved in working test. You can't be like a working test champion or something. It doesn't exist. So working tests were originally this sort of a fun way to prepare your dog over the summer for the shooting season coming up. That's kind of what they were. They were not really supposed to be that serious. They were not supposed to be, they were competitive, but in a sort of jokey kind of, my dog's better than your dog kind of way, rather than being really seriously competitive. And I think what's happened recently is they've got a bit more seriously competitive, but they still don't have any titles associated with them. Yeah.
Oh, that's really, really interesting. Do you feel like this these different things that you're speaking about produce different kind of dogs? Because I don't it's a little bit over my head sometimes when people talk about this because it's not like my world, but I've heard people say things like, "Oh, I avoid dogs from this kind of background or whatever because it's not their preference." Are they kind of producing different kinds of dogs depending on like what you're looking at here?
Do you mean dogs bred for field trials as compared to dogs bred for working tests? Or,
Yeah, versus
I mean,
maybe dogs bred just for working.
yes. I mean, yes, I think particularly when it comes to retrievers, there are people who would say that there's a big difference between a dog which is working on a shoot and just picking up, and a good dog on a shoot, and what you'd expect from that dog, and a dog that you want to trial with. And there are even people who would not want to take a field trial prospect out on a shoot because what it might be required to do to serve the shoot and to get the game back may not be in the interest of developing its training for field trials. Because, for example, they would want them to maintain a straight line if they're doing field trials, and on a shoot, the dog may go off running about all over the place and not run a straight line because there's so much game down on a shoot that they wouldn't need to hold a straight line to find some if they were sent out to sweep up. So things, just that's just one little example. But yeah, so people might sometimes have dogs that they work on shoots and other dogs that they keep for. They might choose the retrieves they want to send that dog on if they do bring it on a shoot because it's a field trial prospect, that sort of thing. So yes, I think that distinction is probably less so with HBRs and Spaniels. HBRs don't really lend themselves very well at all, frankly, to regular shoots. If they're good dogs, they're going to want to hunt much wider than a shoot usually would want a dog to hunt. So most shoots will want a dog to hunt a sort of Spaniel-sized beat. And HBRs are going to want to hunt much, much wider because they're bred to run much further. So that can sometimes create difficulties if your dog wants to go across other dogs' beats, or if they're just hunting too wide and into the next drive. There can be a lot of cover, so it can be really hard. You're like stumbling through undergrowth, and your busty little spaniel, you'll be able to hear where they are. They'll be quite near you, but your HBR might quickly go behind a bush, and before you know it, be too far away. So it can be hard to keep contact with the dog in the density of cover on a shoot. What they most lend themselves to is picking up, because that's excellent practice for them. Because thing about HBRs is if you go on a sort of shot over day, which is like a practice field trial day, or if you're just out rough shooting, your dog might get like 2 or 3 retrieves all day because they have to hunt for each retrieve and find it, and that takes time. Whereas so that can mean they don't get much experience picking up. And then when you're on a field trial, your dog may not be experienced picking up, and what might happen is your dog may put the game down, they may not deliver to hand, you might have retrieving issues because your dog is just not kind of au fait and really relaxed about retrieving because they haven't retrieved that much. So picking up for these breeds can be really good because they get like dozens and dozens and dozens of birds, and they just get really used to picking up loads. Because the last thing you want if you're in a field trial is to fall at the final hurdle. You don't want your dog to hunt beautifully, point beautifully, be steady to flush, shot and fall of game, be sent to retrieve, and then they balls up the retrieve. You just want to make sure that final piece is there so that you don't, fall at the final hurdle.
No, I was just curious because like sometimes you see pedigrees and maybe they have field trial champion or maybe they don't. And, there's a lot of dogs that are coming from like the gun dog world, but maybe they're not a field trial champion, or maybe they've done the working test, like you said. I just wondered if there would be behavioral traits associated with maybe a field trial champion that maybe you wouldn't get in just a gun dog, but maybe it's just kind of all the, like, a gun dog is a gun dog kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on how you got to look at the pedigree of the dog and how far back has it not had that field blood in it, that field trial blood in it. Because a lot of the times they will, even like a couple of generations ago. Sometimes you have some dogs which you look at the pedigrees and I don't really know any of these dogs. They're just like, sometimes in all breeds of dog you get dogs which have just been pet dogs for like generations, generations, and generations. You don't recognize any of the affixes in the pedigree, and like, I don't know how to read this pedigree because I don't know any of these dogs in it. And there are some dogs like that, but you don't know what you're going to get really. Statistically, probably you're not going to get a dog that can hunt, depending on what breed it is you're looking at.
If it doesn't have a field trial champion in.
If it doesn't have some of that in it somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and relatively recently. I mean, it's like any sort of dog sport, isn't it? Like you've got to sort of test the dogs, assess the dogs to make sure they can do the job.
So is that mainstream enough then that you're seeing that, you know what I mean? Like, the field trial stuff there's enough field trial champions in the country that you're going to see them in pedigrees frequently.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the breed concerned and the country that you're talking about as well. So
Just talking about the UK, really.
yeah, I mean, again, it depends on the breed. So some breeds have got loads more field trial champions than other breeds. Yeah, it depends on the breed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will be listening to this, and I love kind of getting into all of this, but I would say probably a bigger audience actually than people that are interested in that kind of stuff is more nowadays is the people that maybe, like we were speaking about earlier in the podcast, they went and got a working dog and now they're like, oh my God, what have I taken on here? But if they're listening to this podcast, they're probably interested enough that they're kind of like the person you described. They're like, okay, I'm kind of getting into this a little bit more. I need to learn more. And yeah, what's the best thing for them to do?
Well, again, it depends on the dog they've got. I always think like people starting out should almost always go to really good general pet dog training class. So like a clicker training class is excellent, but they're not always, you can't always find one. Just a general good positive reinforcement based training class, and take that kind of as far as it goes, because what you're doing now is you're doing recall, you're doing heel work, you're doing sit stays, you're doing all this stuff, you can leave it. All this is like part of gun dog training. So and you don't need to go to a gun dog trainer to get those basics started. And you'll find it much easier to find someone who's going to help you without lots of aversives if you don't go to a gun dog trainer. The thing that I see sometimes with people who sometimes you get people who've got like a gun dog puppy and they look the part. They've got their slip lead on their 5-month-old, I don't know, Labrador or something, and they're wearing all their shooting attire, and they really want to do the gun dog thing, and they want to have the dummies in their pocket. They want to be gun dog people. They don't want to go to pet dog training classes because that's not how they think of themselves. They want to go to a gun dog class. So, the problem there is that gun dog classes, particularly if you've got like boisterous, exuberant puppies that are going to jump around everywhere, a way that they know how to deal with that is correct the dog. So like jerking the lead, correct the dog, put the dog in a sit stay, dog moves, jerk, correct the lead. So, that's their kind of response usually, not always I should say, but that's like your typical standard traditional gun dog response to dogs that do stuff that you don't want them to do, is to punish that stuff that you don't want them to do. And so you don't need to expose your young puppy to all of that. Take them to a really nice positive reinforcement based general pet training class, get all those gun dog skills sorted in that general training class. And then when you've got like a dog which is maybe an adolescent, it can walk reasonably well and leave for short periods of time, they understand the concept of a sit stay, they're not going to jump around everywhere, be a total pain in the bum. The person knows how to train a dog. So if your dog does start to do any of this stuff in the class, you know how to quietly manage it with treats and not make it become a big deal that the person has to come over and show you how to do something to your dog, So get all those skills, both dog and person side of skills, sorted first before you go to a gun dog class. And then when you need the gun dog specific input, that's the point to go to find your local gun dog class and go there. I mean, there are places like the Gun Dog Club. I should give a shout out to them because they have on their website a list of instructors around the UK who use positive reinforcement and are force free. And so that's a good starting point. I would say if you want to get to the point of actually competing with your dog, you probably need to move on from there. But it's a good, halfway house between your sort of pet dog classes and your traditional gun dog classes. You can go through those and then go on somewhere else afterwards. So as you get more involved, you'll learn more about what's out there and how to access it and what's near you, because that's very relevant as well. What's accessible to you. Yeah.
A lot of the people that have come to me with the young working line dogs, actually, I direct them to your website and they go through the courses and they have a...
Yeah, I forgot to say that. I always forget to mention my stuff. By the way, everyone, my website is called Force-Free Gundog.com, and it has lots of online courses teaching you how to do stuff using Force-Free methods. And my book is called Force-Free Gundog Training, Precision and Progression. I should just get that there as well. I don't know if you mentioned the title. Yes, but yeah, I always forget to mention my stuff.
And I guess the starting place, though, for most people, if they've not done anything, they should start with a fundamentals book. Is that right?
Yeah, the fundamentals, and then of my courses, probably the Reliable Recall and Heal are probably like the basic sort of courses I'd recommend for most people. Yeah.
All right, fantastic.
Yeah.
Is there anything... Sorry, go ahead.
So if you get a puppy from me, you get all of my online courses.
You've only got one left, though, right?
There's one puppy left.
Is there anything? And of course your podcast show. I know, and
yes.
I don't want to overwhelm people, but the Hold the Line podcast is
Hold the Line. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really, really good. I
should say it's called Hold the Line because sometimes people are a bit confused by this if they don't understand. So if you're beating, like they want you to hold the line and not have one person get in front of the other, and you often hear people go hold the line when you're beating. So that's why. Yeah.
Okay.
It's nothing to do with that terrible 80s song, which has got some hold the line.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. All right, super. Well, good to speak to you, Joe. That was really fun.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me.